You come in, you have a history, and an examination is done. We have some sort of a differential diagnosis. We then, based on what our judgment may be about what could or couldn't be wrong, which we do some investigations, we analyse that result, be it a lab result or an X-ray. We then have a definitive diagnosis. We develop a care plan, we implement the plan, and we follow up and review. It doesn't necessarily flow like that, but that's the ideal of what should happen. This is usually what a patient sees, right? We bring them in, and there's no direct route to an outpatient department, and they have to go and find their way around. We say to them, right, we need to do an X-ray, go over to the X-ray department, and it's not in the general direction of where they are now, and tests come back and forward, etc., etc. So we don't have things in a linear fashion. Partly because we are dealing with old buildings, partly to do with the thought process of when we built them up, partly to do with the silos that we've always worked in. And the piece about medicine becoming subspecialists, whereby we don't have generalists anymore, we have a lot of subspecialties within a faculty, so that somebody becomes very specialised in their field, and then they are not joined up to the remainder of that specialty necessarily. So if I was to look at a doctor's visit, the various pieces that you do, now this could be an outpatient department or it could be a GP clinic, and the time on the left hand side is basically the touch time, the amount of time you actually got anything done, whereas the stuff on the other side is the wait. So if you were to look at 130 minutes this person was in an outpatient department or a GP clinic, more likely, because an outpatient department will sometimes takes far longer than 130 minutes, you can see the ratio of time value added. And that wouldn't be unusual in our service. To the extent here that this patient...
That data that you have, is that real?
Oh yeah, yeah, real data, yeah. And I thought at this stage you might need sort of a light relief moment, and this patient is sitting in OPD. And the receptionist says to him, would you like Dr. Alston to bring you back something to eat? And the patient asks, something to eat? And he says, why would he want to do that? Well, he knows you've been waiting a long time, and he feels guilty because he's leaving for lunch now, and he wants to know if you'd like him to bring back something. And what may be funny, there are times, and there used to be times in the past, where patients would see it upon themselves to come into an outpatient department when they weren't booked in, and they'd just sit there and they wouldn't sign in. And then at the end of a clinic, somebody'd say, well, what are you doing here, or who are you here to see, or whatever. And we forget sometimes that we're dealing with disorientated people sometimes, and in other cases they were trying to jump the system but weren't clever enough to know how to jump the system by, or it could have been that a consultant told them to come from their private clinic and walk in, and some of the people decided, well, if they're walk-ins they can wait until the end.